In the realm of true crime, few stories evoke as much intrigue and horror as that of Susan Wright, infamously dubbed the Blue-Eyed Butcher of Texas. This chilling saga has captivated audiences worldwide, its gruesome details sending shivers down the spine of even the most seasoned observers. With its blend of betrayal, violence, and deception, the case of Susan Wright has become a haunting reminder of the darkness that can lurk within seemingly ordinary lives. The story of Susan Wright unfolds like a nightmare brought to life, drawing attention not only for its brutality, but also for the disturbing insights it offers into the complexities of human behavior. From the outside, Susan and Jeffrey Wright appeared to be the picture-perfect couple, living the American dream in their quaint home in Harris County, Texas. Yet behind closed doors, their reality was anything but idyllic. As the details of Susan Wright's crime emerged, the media seized upon the sensational nature of the case, thrusting it into the spotlight and sparking widespread fascination. Headlines blared with shocking revelations, drawing in viewers eager to uncover the truth behind the facade of marital bliss. Join us as we delve deep into the depths of this chilling tale, unraveling the layers of deception and despair that ultimately culminated in tragedy. From the initial whispers of suspicion to the gripping courtroom drama that followed, we'll explore every twist and turn of the Susan Wright case, seeking to understand the motivations behind her heinous actions and the lasting impact they've had on all who were touched by the events that unfolded. Brace yourselves for a journey into the heart of darkness, where the line between perpetrator and victim blurs, and justice hangs in the balance. Susan Wright's story begins in the heart of Texas, where she was born into a seemingly ordinary family with hopes and dreams like any other. Raised in Houston, Susan's early years were marked by a sense of optimism and creativity. From a young age, she displayed a natural talent for dance and harbored aspirations of one day becoming a choreographer, her spirit undaunted by the challenges that lay ahead. Despite her ambitions, Susan's path to success was not without obstacles. After graduating from high school, she faced setbacks in her pursuit of higher education, finding herself unable to gain entry to college. Undeterred, she took matters into her own hands, determined to carve out a future for herself through hard work and perseverance. It was during this time that Susan crossed paths with Jeffrey Andrew Wright, a man who would come to play a pivotal role in shaping her destiny. Their initial encounter at a Galveston restaurant sparked a whirlwind romance, with Jeffrey's charm and charisma quickly winning Susan over. Despite their 8-year age difference, the pair found themselves drawn to one another, their connection seemingly unbreakable. However, beneath the surface of their budding relationship, signs of trouble began to emerge. Jeffrey's struggles with alcohol and substance abuse cast a shadow over their happiness, raising red flags that Susan could not ignore. Despite his promises of change, Jeffrey's demons continued to haunt their relationship, leaving Susan grappling with feelings of uncertainty and fear. Yet, in the midst of turmoil, Susan found herself facing a new challenge: motherhood. With the arrival of their first child, Bradley, Susan hoped that the joys of parenthood would bring her closer to Jeffrey and solidify their bond. But as the demands of family life mounted, so too did the strain on their relationship, revealing cracks that threatened to tear them apart. Despite her best efforts to hold their family together, Susan found herself trapped in a cycle of abuse and manipulation, struggling to reconcile the man she loved with the monster he had become. With each passing day, the facade of their perfect life crumbled, leaving Susan to confront the harsh reality of her situation. As tensions reached a boiling point, Susan found herself facing an impossible choice: to continue living in fear or to take matters into her own hands. Little did she know that her decision would alter the course of her life forever, plunging her into a nightmare from which she could never fully escape. On the surface, the Wright family appeared to be the epitome of suburban bliss, residing in a cozy home nestled in the quiet streets of Harris County, Texas. With their 2 adorable children, Bradley and Kaylee, and a faithful canine companion named Buck, they exuded an aura of happiness and contentment that belied the dark truths lurking beneath the surface. Neighbors spoke fondly of Susan Wright, praising her as a devoted mother and loving wife, while Jeffrey Wright's affable demeanor endeared him to those around him. Together, they painted a picture of domestic harmony that seemed straight out of a storybook. Yet behind closed doors, a different reality unfolded, one marred by abuse, control, and manipulation. Jeffrey's outward charm masked a darker side, one that reveled in exerting power over his family with an iron fist. From the outset of their marriage, Susan found herself ensnared in a web of fear and intimidation, her every move scrutinized and policed by her husband's relentless demands. Jeffrey's abusive behavior knew no bounds, targeting not only Susan, but also their innocent children. His strict rules and unreasonable expectations cast a shadow over their daily lives, leaving Susan scrambling to maintain an illusion of normalcy in the face of mounting turmoil. The slightest deviation from Jeffrey's standards was met with verbal assaults, humiliation, and even physical violence, a terrifying reality that Susan and her children were forced to endure in silence. Financially, Jeffrey's stinginess knew no bounds, leaving Susan struggling to make ends meet on a meager allowance, while he indulged in his vices, unchecked. His promises of reform were empty, his actions speaking louder than words, as he spiraled further into addiction and cruelty. For Susan, each day was a delicate balancing act, navigating the treacherous waters of her husband's moods and temper tantrums, while striving to shield her children from harm. But as the facade of their perfect family life began to crumble, Susan found herself teetering on the brink of despair, trapped in a nightmare of her own making. The Wrights' home, once a sanctuary of love and warmth, became a battleground where Susan fought tirelessly to protect her children from the horrors unfolding before their eyes. But as Jeffrey's grip tightened, Susan realized that escape was futile, her only solace lying in the hope that one day, justice would prevail and the truth would finally come to light. As tension simmered beneath the surface of their seemingly idyllic life, the Wright family teetered on the edge of a precipice, the weight of Jeffrey's abusive behavior bearing down on Susan like a suffocating blanket. Night after night, she endured his tirades and tantrums, clinging to the hope that things would eventually improve. But as the days stretched into weeks and the weeks into months, Susan found herself sinking deeper into despair, her dreams of a better future slipping through her fingers like grains of sand. It was on the fateful night of January 13th, 2003, that the simmering tensions between Susan and Jeffrey finally reached a boiling point, culminating in a violent confrontation that would forever alter the course of their lives. As Jeffrey returned home from his evening at the gym, his agitation palpable in the air, Susan braced herself for yet another barrage of abuse, her heart heavy with dread. But what transpired next defied all expectations, plunging Susan into a nightmare from which she could never fully awaken. As Jeffrey demonstrated boxing techniques to their young son, Bradley, Susan watched in horror as her worst fears were realized before her very eyes. When Bradley recoiled in fear, Jeffrey's rage boiled over, his fists raining down on the helpless child with a ferocity that left Susan reeling. In a desperate bid to protect her son, Susan intervened, pleading with Jeffrey to stop before it was too late. But her pleas fell on deaf ears, Jeffrey's fury escalating with each passing moment until Susan found herself staring into the face of pure evil. It was then, in a moment of desperate desperation, that Susan made a decision that would change everything. With her heart pounding in her chest, she resolved to take matters into her own hands, her mind racing with thoughts of escape and survival. As Jeffrey retired to their bedroom, Susan seized upon an opportunity to strike, using her skills as a dancer to lure him into a false sense of security. With a silk robe draped over her slender frame, she danced before him, her movements hypnotic and alluring. And as Jeffrey's defenses crumbled, Susan struck with a force born of desperation, her hands wielding a knife with a precision that bordered on madness. The events that followed were a blur of pain and chaos, as Susan unleashed her pent-up fury upon her husband with a savagery that defied comprehension. With each stab of the knife, she exorcised the demons that had haunted her for so long, her screams echoing through the night as she fought for her very survival. When the dust finally settled, Jeffrey lay motionless upon the bed, his lifeblood staining the sheets beneath him. And as Susan stood over him, her hands trembling with a mixture of fear and triumph, she knew that there would be no turning back. For on that fateful night, in the depths of darkness, Susan Wright had crossed a line from which there could be no return, a line that separated her from the woman she once was, and the monster she had become. In the aftermath of the brutal attack, Susan found herself faced with a daunting task: concealing the evidence of her crime and evading detection by law enforcement. With the weight of guilt bearing down on her shoulders, she embarked on a desperate mission to cover her tracks and bury the truth along with her husband's lifeless body. Under the cover of darkness, Susan set to work, her hands trembling as she dragged Jeffrey's limp form from their bedroom to the backyard. With each step, the weight of her actions bore down upon her, the reality of what she had done sinking in with a sickening thud. And yet, she pressed on, driven by a primal instinct for survival and a fear of the consequences that awaited her. Arriving at the shallow pit that Jeffrey had dug over the weekend, Susan's resolve wavered for a fleeting moment, her mind reeling with the enormity of what she was about to do. But with the specter of discovery looming large in her mind, she pushed aside her doubts and set to work, her movements mechanical and devoid of emotion. With painstaking precision, Susan lowered Jeffrey's lifeless body into the makeshift grave, her hands shaking as she covered him with dirt and debris. And as she stood over his final resting place, a sense of numbness washed over her, the gravity of her actions sinking in with a bone-deep certainty. But even as Susan buried her husband's body, the truth refused to stay buried along with him. For in the days that followed, whispers of suspicion began to swirl around the quiet streets of Harris County, casting a shadow of doubt over Susan's carefully constructed facade. It was not long before law enforcement descended upon the Wrights' home, their presence a grim reminder of the horrors that lay hidden beneath the surface. With each passing hour, the noose tightened around Susan's neck, her facade of innocence crumbling in the face of overwhelming evidence. And when the truth finally came to light, it was more horrific than anyone could have imagined. For in the backyard of the Wrights' home, investigators unearthed the grisly remains of Jeffrey's body, his lifeless form bearing the scars of Susan's savage attack. As the full extent of Susan's crimes came to light, the community recoiled in horror, struggling to come to terms with the monstrous acts committed in their midst. And as Susan faced the consequences of her actions in a court of law, the truth of what had transpired that fateful night became clear for all to see. For in the end, no amount of deception or denial could erase the stains of blood that marked the Wrights' home, a grim reminder of the darkness that lurked behind closed doors, waiting to be uncovered. The trial of Susan Wright, dubbed the Blue-Eyed Butcher of Texas, gripped the nation as it unfolded in a courtroom filled with tension and emotion. As the prosecution laid out its case against Susan, the chilling details of her crime were laid bare for all to see, painting a picture of brutality and betrayal that shook the community to its core. With each passing day of the trial, the prosecution presented a mountain of evidence against Susan, including forensic analysis of Jeffrey's wounds and testimony from witnesses who had observed the couple's tumultuous relationship. Photographs of the crime scene painted a gruesome picture of the violence that had erupted within the walls of the Wrights' home, leaving no doubt as to the horrors that had transpired that fateful night. But as the prosecution made its case, Susan's defense team launched a counterattack, employing a strategy that sought to portray Susan as a victim of her husband's abuse rather than a cold-blooded killer. With tearful testimonies and impassioned pleas for understanding, Susan's lawyers painted a picture of a woman pushed to the brink by years of torment and suffering. Central to Susan's defense was the claim of self-defense, with her lawyers arguing that Susan had acted out of fear for her own life and the lives of her children. They pointed to Jeffrey's history of violence and manipulation as evidence of his dangerous nature, painting him as the true villain of the story. But perhaps the most compelling argument put forth by Susan's defense team was that of emotional distress, with her lawyers arguing that Susan's actions were driven not by malice, but by a desperate desire to escape the cycle of abuse that had consumed her life. They pointed to Susan's history of depression and anxiety as evidence of her fragile mental state, painting a picture of a woman pushed to the edge by circumstances beyond her control. As the trial drew to a close, the jury was faced with a difficult decision: to convict Susan of murder or to acquit her in light of the extenuating circumstances surrounding the case. And when the verdict was finally handed down, it sent shockwaves through the courtroom and beyond. Despite Susan's claims of self-defense and emotional distress, the jury ultimately found her guilty of murder, sentencing her to 25 years in prison for her role in Jeffrey's death. It was a verdict that divided opinion and sparked debate across the nation, with some seeing Susan as a victim of circumstance and others as a cold-blooded killer who deserved to be punished to the fullest extent of the law. But regardless of where one stood on the issue, one thing was clear. The trial of Susan Wright had laid bare the dark underbelly of domestic violence, shining a spotlight on the horrors that lurked behind closed doors and the devastating toll it could take on those caught in its grip. And as Susan began her long journey behind bars, the scars of her past would serve as a constant reminder of the price paid for breaking free from the cycle of abuse. Following the harrowing trial, Susan Wright was met with the weighty hammer of justice as the court handed down a sentence that would alter the course of her life forever. Found guilty of the brutal murder of her husband, Jeffrey Wright, Susan was sentenced to 25 years behind bars, a punishment that reflected the gravity of her actions and the irreversible loss inflicted upon her family. Yet, as Susan languished in her prison cell, a glimmer of hope remained on the distant horizon in the form of the appeals process. A last-ditch effort to overturn the verdict and secure a chance at redemption. With her legal team by her side, Susan embarked on a journey fraught with uncertainty and despair, clinging to the faint hope that justice would one day be served. As the appeals process unfolded, new evidence emerged that shed fresh light on the circumstances surrounding Jeffrey's death, casting doubt on the validity of Susan's conviction and opening the door to the possibility of a second chance. Witnesses came forward with testimony that challenged the prosecution's narrative, painting a more nuanced picture of the events that had transpired on that fateful night. With each new revelation, Susan's defense team launched a renewed assault on the prosecution's case, seizing upon inconsistencies and discrepancies in the evidence to bolster their argument for a retrial. And as the wheels of justice turned once more, Susan clung to the hope that her innocence would one day be vindicated, allowing her to reclaim her life and rebuild what had been lost. In a stunning twist of fate, Susan's perseverance paid off as the court granted her appeal, citing the emergence of new evidence that called into question the fairness of her trial. With her conviction overturned, Susan found herself on the brink of freedom once more, a beacon of hope in a sea of despair. But even as Susan's sentence was reduced and her release from prison loomed on the horizon, the scars of her past continued to haunt her, serving as a stark reminder of the price paid for breaking free from the cycle of abuse. And as she stepped out into the world once more, Susan vowed to never forget the trials and tribulations that had brought her to this moment, carrying with her the weight of her past as a testament to the enduring power of hope and resilience. The case of Susan Wright, known infamously as the Blue-Eyed Butcher of Texas, captured the attention of the public and media alike, becoming a sensationalized story that gripped the nation. From newspaper headlines to television broadcasts, the shocking details of Susan's crime and trial were plastered across every available platform, drawing in audiences with morbid fascination and intrigue. Television networks clamored to cover the case, with documentary programs such as Court TV and 48 Hours Mystery, dedicating entire episodes to dissecting the intricacies of Susan's story. Viewers tuned in eagerly, captivated by the twists and turns of the trial and the larger-than-life characters at its center. But it was not just television that seized upon the spectacle of Susan's trial. Hollywood also took notice, with filmmakers eager to translate her story onto the silver screen. In 2012, the feature film Blue-Eyed Butcher was released, starring actress Sarah Paxton in the titular role. The film offered a dramatized retelling of Susan's descent into madness, exploring the complexities of her character and the motivations behind her actions. In addition to feature films, Susan's story also found its way into the realm of documentary filmmaking, with Canadian filmmaker Chloe Borland releasing a short film titled The Wheel of Fortune in 2014. Inspired by the trial of Jeffrey Wright, the documentary offered a stark and unflinching look at the events that had transpired, shedding light on the dark underbelly of domestic violence and its devastating impact on those caught in its web. As Susan's story continued to captivate audiences, it became a staple of popular culture, serving as fodder for endless discussions and debates. From online forums to water cooler conversations, everyone had an opinion on the case of the Blue-Eyed Butcher, with theories and speculation running rampant. But beyond the sensationalism and spectacle, Susan's story served as a sobering reminder of the realities of domestic abuse and the toll it takes on its victims. As the media frenzy died down and the spotlight moved on to the next big story, Susan's legacy endured as a cautionary tale, a stark reminder of the dangers that lurk behind closed doors. In the end, Susan's story was not just a headline or a footnote in history. It was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the enduring power of hope in the face of adversity. And as her story faded from the headlines and the cameras stopped rolling, Susan's voice remained, a whisper in the wind, reminding us all of the fragile line between love and madness and the price paid for crossing it. The case of Susan Wright, the blue-eyed butcher of Texas, stands as a haunting reminder of the depths of human darkness and the complexities of the human condition. From its beginnings as a seemingly ordinary tale of love and family, it descended into a nightmare of abuse, manipulation, and ultimately, violence. Susan's story serves as a sobering reminder of the prevalence of domestic abuse and the devastating toll it can take on its victims. Her descent into madness, fueled by years of torment and despair, is a testament to the insidious nature of abuse and the lengths to which some will go to escape its grasp. But Susan's story is not just one of tragedy and despair, it is also a story of resilience and hope. Despite the horrors she endured, Susan found the strength to stand up and speak out, ultimately seeking justice for herself and her children. And while her path was fraught with obstacles and challenges, she never lost sight of the light at the end of the tunnel, clinging to the hope that one day she would find redemption. As the media frenzy surrounding Susan's case fades into memory, her legacy endures as a cautionary tale, a stark reminder of the dangers that lurk behind closed doors and the importance of speaking out against abuse. Her story serves as a rallying cry for change, inspiring others to break free from the cycle of violence and reclaim their lives. In the end, Susan's journey is a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit, the power to survive, to overcome, and to find redemption in the face of unimaginable adversity. And as her story fades into the annals of history, her voice remains, a beacon of hope in a world shrouded in darkness.